Well, everyone, thank you for joining us today for the State Plan Prep webinar. I am Kyle Gasser with NASCAS, and I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping items here before we start. Just to let you all know, all attendees' audio is unmuted. If you have questions, please enter it into the chat addressed to all panelists. You'll find the chat box located at the right-hand side of your screen. Questions answered during a Q&A period at the end of the webinar. With that, I'll hand it over to Donna and the rest of OCS.
Good, and welcome everyone this afternoon to the State Plan Preparation webinar. We're glad that you can join us. We want to thank NASCAS for hosting this webinar for us this afternoon, and we look forward to discussing and preparing for the fiscal year 19 state plan submission. By my colleagues here at OCS, Nikki Frazier, our records manager, Jimmy Bush, our program specialist over regions 2, 8, and 10. Again, I'm Jonna Holden, a program specialist working with regions 1 and region 4A. Our agenda for this afternoon, we noticed at the recent Winter NASCAS conference there were several new state staff, and today on our webinar we also have many state members who will this year be using OLVC and the state plan for maybe the second or third time submitting. So today's webinar is going to kind of be a combination of a refresher for those who have completed it before. We'll be reviewing the section purposes for each piece of the state plan, but we'll also be discussing some highlights from either new questions to revised state plan, or there has been new areas of guidance, also areas where we've seen some trends and information that we'd like to just clarify. It's also going to be an opportunity for us to discuss the essentials of the plan submission, some common themes such as the SF424M form, as well as the CSV public hearing requirements, the necessary attachments. It's also going to be a great opportunity for you to ask any questions that you have about the state plan. We know that many of you this winter and this spring are already developing the plan, so we want to give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. As we go through the presentation, through each section, that you fill in your questions in the chat box for that particular section as we go along. Again, this will be our third submission of the new revised CSBG state plan. We'll talk today about the FY19 submission requirements and process. There will be some slight updates that we'll talk about in terms of the clearance. We will this year continue to use the Online Data Collection System, or OLVC, as we call it. As mentioned, the state plan, the clearance for our state plan ends on July 2nd, or in July of 2018. And so OCS over the past few months has been working on revising and updating the state plan document. The first Federal Register notice through OMB was November of 2017 through January of this year, where we received comments from state and from entities helping to give us some feedback on those revisions. And many of those revisions that were made in the state plan really were to update where we would be clarifying information. There's also an opportunity for us to be able to put in logic checks and things that will make the plan easier to use. So the Federal Register notice will be in March, or sometime around March to April timeframe, and we ask during that time for you to participate in that clearance process by saying either supportive, clarifying, or comments that will help us to make revisions to the plan. The 19 submission will be, we anticipate it to be open in the online data collection system around the July timeframe. The deadline will still be September 1st of 2018. OCS staff will be working diligently with each of you to ensure that you'll be able to access the technology and have all the technical assistance that you need in order to do the data entry for your plan. In the meantime, the things that you can be using and that you have available to you to prepare for the state plan submission include the plan document itself in Word format. Also, there have been a number of webinars over the course of the last few years through OCS, NASCAS, and as well as our technical partners that are available on our website. In addition, we encourage you to reference any of the relevant information memoranda that are mentioned throughout the plan document. Some reminders about OLDC. Now, we're not doing a full training on the use of OLDC today. We do have training and technical assistance that's out there, and as we'll mention later in the presentation, we'll have additional opportunities before the actual plan submission to get additional training and technical assistance on the system. But just a few reminders here. We want to make sure that all of those who are planning, which should be all of us, to submit a state plan or the SF424M this year, you want to ensure that you have someone on staff or those individuals who are involved with data entry and the submission of the plan. You want to make sure that those accounts have been established. Reach out to your program specialist or Nikki Frazier, as we'll mention later, to ensure that you have the right permissions and you have that account established in OLDC. We also encourage you, we know that you may not be using OLDC regularly, so we encourage you to access the system and just log on with your credentials every 60 days or so just to avoid lockout on the system, so that way your credentials can stay up to date in OLDC. We also want to remind you, as you go through OLDC this summer, to pay attention to the maximum number of characters in each section. It over to my colleague Nikki Frazier, who will take us through additional information about the state plan.
Donna, states entering the second year of their two-year plan must complete and submit the SF424M report. Note that this is a separate OLDC report that you will find in the drop-down on the report sections page in OLDC. You should check OCS in advance if your state plans to submit a revision or update to your current state plan. States must use the CSBG state plan report to submit revisions or updates. The deadline letter I'll give you tidbits. First, the plan must be certified by the designated official. As you stated several times before, any person that needs access to OLDC to certify or edit should have access to OLDC, and that can be done by completing the OLDC access form. Consider utilizing the title or position on the designation letter. This is referencing a specific individual. This will alleviate having to submit a new designation letter if there are staff changes. Designation must originate from the governor's office. Subsequent designation, if necessary, must follow the command. The designation letter does not need to be updated each year, and the exception to that is if there are any personnel changes that has been identified on the designation letter. Also, the letter does not need to be changed when we install a new OCS director. Attach documents using the paperclip icon located after each designated section. see that paper clip at the end of the section item, and you should use that with section. You should not use the function on the top or bottom of the page of each section. When naming documents that you're going to attach, you should name that document using the item number, so it references the actual item in which the attachment is used for. Okay, I'll turn it back over to John. Thank you.
So before we go into discussing the sections of the state plan, we ask for those on the call, if you do have questions now about the SF-424M form, the designation letter, or how to attach, or any questions about the attachments, please go ahead and enter those into the chat box now. So Section 1 of the state plan, CSBG Administrative Information. So the purpose of this section is to collect information on state CSBG authorized officials, CSBG program officials, also for us to collect a copy of the designation letter that Nikki just spoke to. So 1.1, we wanted to here discuss submission options. Now, as I talk through this, I want you to think about going to your printer to make copies. And if you're like me, you ask for help or ask for someone else to do it because you're liable to go through a whole ream of paper. You look on the screen and you see you can change it from one page to front and back or front and back to one page. So this is how I'm describing the submission options from a 1-year versus a 2-year plan. Just to walk through that, if you submitted a 1-year plan last year, because CSBG allows you the flexibility to submit either a 1-year or a 2-year plan, for a 1-year plan that was submitted last year, you can either submit a new 1-year plan or a new 2-year plan if you choose to. Last year, or if rather 2 years ago, you submitted a 2-year plan and you're at the end of that 2-year plan, you can submit a new 2-year plan or a new 1-year plan. You can choose to go back to that 1-year or 2-year cycle. Now, if you are in an existing 2-year plan, and this is an area that we'd like for those who are in an existing 2-year plan and you're just in the 2nd year of that plan to pay attention to, you have the option of either submitting the SF-424M only. If you choose to, you can update or revise the 2nd year of your 2-year plan. The reason why we bring this to your attention is because we've had some states that were in the middle of a 2-year plan and still submitted an additional plan. So that's not necessary for your submission. You only, if you're in the 2nd year of that 2-year plan, again, need to submit the SF-424, or you also have the option to update or revise that plan. So legislation and regulation. And the purpose of this section is to collect information on state legislation and regulation. So that we'd like to point out in this section is that in 2.3, we ask that you ensure that the hyperlinks work if you choose to hyperlink either your legislation or regulation. We've noticed that there have been a number of hyperlinks that were either pasted in that were broken, or the hyperlinks were no longer working. And unfortunately, the system at this time will not allow us to test those hyperlinks in terms of the validations to ensure that they work. So we ask that on your side that you double check that those work before submitting. We also ask that if you decide to attach legislation or regulation, that you include the question number for which the document provides supplementary information, the question heading, and the type of document that you've provided. So we're giving you a sort of a description here to use as the title of your document when you upload it. So an example here is that you would note that you were uploading related to question 2.3, legislation regulation, and This is for, looks like Washington, D.C.'s plan, and that is the statute. State plan development and statewide goals. And the purpose of this section is to collect information from the state about their mission, their CSBG specific goals and vision, also the types of input that the state used in order to develop the state plan, and the involvement of the eligible entities in the state plan development. So what to point out in Section 3 is that states can definitely provide multiple administrative or program-related goals. You're limited to setting only one goal, and we've seen instances where states have reported, or rather planned for more than one goal and reported on those various goals in the annual report. We also want to point out that in this section, we're really looking for this to develop goals, not restate what would be a requirement of CSBG. So the example that we're listing here is that if the state mentioned that their goal was to distribute 90% funds to all of the eligible entities, well, we know that to be a requirement of CSBG. So that really, we wouldn't view that as a goal as developed by the state. So some other examples of goals that we've seen in the state plan that may be goals, like for instance, some states have mentioned increasing their state effectiveness, and they've listed the areas that they want to improve that, such as communication or fund distribution. In terms of new guidance, in Section 3, there is a guidance piece that will be distributed when the guidance documents are included with the state plan document that goes out. That states to, when setting their goals, to consider the performance management data in terms of developing those goals. So we know now we have information such as the ACSI data. We have on how our eligible entities are meeting organizational standards, and also accountability measures. So we're encouraging states to consider that information, and that you have other information at your fingertips to help you develop your state goals. Question 3.5, we have provided some guidance there and asked states, when setting targets for this particular question, to review IM 150. And IM 150 is on the American Customer Satisfaction Index. And in that item, we have guidance from our partners at CFI where they've helped us to parse out wherever states have fallen in their overall ACSI score, whether it was in the 80s or the 70s or the 60s, there's a recommended amount of points that states should look at as an appropriate target for setting. So we encourage you to look at that IM prior to setting your ACSI target. For CSBG hearing requirements. So the purpose of this section is to verify that the state has met their requirements for public notice, the public hearing, as well as the legislative hearing. So we want to just make a reminder here that the legislative hearing only be required every 3 years, where the public hearing will be required annually. When states decide to combine both the legislative and the public hearing, what we ask is that you have clear documentation that both were held and that both the public and legislators were invited to that event. So it's clear based on your documentation that those hearings were combined. One of the new guidance pieces that are included in the revised state plan talk about sufficient notification time. We've in some state plans where there have been 2-week time frame or 3-week time frame, and what we're recommending is that a sufficient time frame would be 30 days or more for notifying legislators and the public for the hearing. The section CG eligible entities, and the purpose of this section is to collect the data on all of the eligible entities, whether public and private, their entity type, and the service area. So in Section 5, one of the new information collections is related to any changes in the eligible entity list. One of those areas that we focused in Section 5 are the mergers, the de-designation, and the redesignation. So if you look in Section 5 of the revised state plan, there is additional guidance that speaks to and defines mergers, defines de-designation and redesignation, and will ask you to update the list based on those areas. Section organizational standards for eligible entities. So the purpose of this section is to describe the state's procedures as it relates to the org standards. Asking states in this section to describe the choice of standards, whether they're using the COE standards, a modified standard, or alternate form of standards. Also, how the state is implementing the org standards process at the state level. The state plans to assess, so their assessment procedures, including how corrective action ties into the org standards, and any special circumstances, exemptions of org standards that may be within the state. So going back to Section 6, the new question 6.3, we ask in this question that states approach to us any process improvements that they've made within a year, or plan to make, rather, as this is a state on the organizational standards process. Also, new guidance as it relates to question 6.5. In 6.5, we ask states to consider IM 138. IM 138 describes the responsibilities of the states as it relates to reviewing, assessing organizational standards. And we encourage states to review the previous performance and collaborate with eligible entities and state associations in identifying the targets for meeting their org standards. The purpose of this section is to collect information on the planned use of CSBG funds in the areas of the 90% funds, administrative funds, and the remainder in discretionary. At this time, there are no items to note in the state plan, but there may be additional guidance after the next review of the annual report. We just encourage those states that are in tier states to remember that you will be required to use both tables in filling out that fund information. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Jamia Furbush.
State training and technical assistance. OCS would like to know what training and technical assistance is being delivered, the planned budget for training and technical assistance plan, state, and how to collaborate with the state association and other stakeholders, how the training and technical assistance will be provided. With the table, state be able to indicate the time frame, if training, technical assistance, or both, as well as the topic, are being provided. And in this section, please note that in Table 8.1, for 1 year and 2 year plans, should indicate the trainings that are being paid for using state discretionary training and technical assistance funds as noted under 7.9A. TAPS, Technical Assistance Plan, and QUIP's Quality Improvement Plan. The plan indicates if states have TAPS or QUIP in place for all eligible entities with organizational standards. If an entity is not put on a QIP, they should put a TAP in place to assist the entity in meeting the standards. Section linkages and communication. The purpose of this section, as you'll see, is to address the linkages and coordination at the state level that the state intends to create, maintain to ensure increased access to CSBG services to income people and communities under the state plan. To ensure increased access to CSBG services to people and communities with lower incomes, state linkages and community section should describe the linkages and communications at the local level, eligible entities, employment and training activities, and at other state offices. State 8.9 now be allowed to select any of all formats to communicate with, which prevents from having to enter additional rows. This thing that we believe be helpful when providing the information in reference to linkages as well as communication. Under Section 9.10, which is new as well, please note that for fiscal year 2019 state plan, states should include how they provide feedback to local entities and state associations within 60 days of receiving feedback from OCS. Section corrective action and fiscal controls. This section should be utilized to specify the proposed schedule for plan monitoring visits, which includes full on-site reviews, reviews of newly designated entities, and follow-up reviews. This will also be an area for states to highlight their time frames for dissemination of initial monitoring reports, as well as the process for addressing findings from the monitoring that is conducted. Monitoring that is specific to organizational standards should be referenced within Section 6 of the state plan. This section, Section 10, should also explain fiscal controls and accounting, single audit management decisions, as well as the assurance of the cooperation and fiscal investigation. Ultimately, to ensure performance management, states should describe any adjustments that are made to monitoring procedures in the state plan, if applicable. Section 10.8B, 10.9B, and 10.10 incorporate new information pertaining to the procedures that states take with regards to designation and redesignation of eligible entities. Each of these areas, states provide information on the procedures that are available to eligible entities and to the public. Full entity tripartite board. Though no significant changes to this section, OCS would like to ensure that states provide information on the measures that are taken to confirm that each state verifies that CSBG eligible entities are meeting tripartite board requirements, which include how often updates are provided to the state by the entities, as well as ensuring eligible entities have procedures pertaining to petitioning for adequate representation on the tripartite board. Eligible and community income eligible ability requirements. With state plans, the eligibility threshold for services in the state should be noted. And then there's an option to select 125% of the HHS poverty line, percentage of the HHS poverty line as chosen by the state. You may select varies by eligible entity. Varies by local entity, states should provide the threshold percentage, as well as the reasoning varies by entity. Overall, in Section 12.1, 125% required by statute is the percentage. 150% is an acceptable response. Even if you do choose to put in another percentage, 150% would not be an acceptable response. It should also describe how they will ensure that eligible entities generally verify income eligibility, as well as how they will ensure eligible entities services target as well as benefit low-income communities. Section 8, Risk-Oriented Management and Accountability System, also known as ROMA. With respect to ROMA, OCS would like to know what each state's choice is and as to their option to choose ROMA or another performance management system all eligible entities use. If another performance management system is selected, it should meet the requirements of Section 678E of the CSBG Act, and states provide further information on the alternative system, which would include the validation of the use of data to improve service delivery. And 15.3, and noting the activities of the entity, should describe how the state plans to support these activities. Section CSBG Programmatic Assurances and Information Narrative. And will the CSBG application requirements for the CSBG Act assurances, states must sign assurances to confirm their commitment to providing CSBG services, which includes the use of funds, coordination, service delivery, board representation, and performance, to name a few. These will not be changing, but they're each year for you to review, as well as to sign to maintain the assurance that you will fulfill them. Second, certifications. Again, this is another section that does not change from year to year, but each year is required to be signed in accordance with federal programs, should agree and sign the federal certifications pertaining to lobbying, maintaining a drug-free workplace, debarment, and maintaining a tobacco-free workplace. The box after each certification must be checked by the state CSBG authorized official. As we have several resources that are available to each state to utilize not only while completing the plan, but throughout the year, which include NASCAS State Plan Technical Resource Center. We have webinars, registering and accessing online data collection, OLDC, webinar reference to fiscal year 2016 model plan submission process, as well as a webinar on the CSBG Model State Plan Technical webinar. We seek assistance internally within OCS. Do recommend that you contact your list, as well as CSBG states at acf.hhs.gov. And as you will see, we have listed Crystal Cruz, Isaac Davis, myself, Jamia Furbush, and Jonna Holden. Each have respective regions that are listed as well. And as well as assistance with ODC, we would you again to CSBG state at acf.hhs.gov, as well as reach out to Ms. Monique Alcantara or Ms. Nee Frazier, who will be able to assist you further with the proper things in OLDC to gain access. With questions and answered. Anyone has any questions that they would like to type now, please feel free to do so. We see we have several questions listed already. We do thank you for those. I can give you time to type more questions if you would like to. Thank you.
So we just want to remind folks that are on the line that we know this is earlier in the year that we're doing this training and technical assistance for the state plan. But again, we just wanted to be thoughtful that many of you have begun looking at this information as early as the beginning of the year, and some of you will be have already begun to develop your state plan in anticipation of discussing with your eligible entities and with your state associations. So we just wanted to ensure that we got these reminders and guidance out early. We will still be issuing the information memoranda in the summertime as it relates to the state plan submission and application and any additional training and technical assistance that's needed for the system. So we want everyone not to worry. We will definitely give you any training and technical assistance and support for entering the plan in OLBC. So particularly if this is your first year developing a state plan or sitting in OLBC, feel free to reach out to your program specialist. And again, the technical contacts that were noted on the last slide there, Nikki Frazier and Monique Alcantara, and we all will be very much happy to help you in guiding you in either the development of the plan and later this summer with being able to enter the plan into OLBC. So I think we're going to take a few Q&As for those who have entered questions. We thank you so much for submitting those questions, and we have for others who have any additional questions, feel free to send those through to the chat. Question that was asked, and excuse me, the chat is moving faster than I can read. So one of the questions is regarding the designation letter. Multiple people have put in a question to ask if there is no new designation letter needed, if there is no change to the governor or the office receiving CSBG. It was previously understood that a new letter was needed for each plan, and the letter needed to be updated to reflect leadership at OCS.
Hi, this is Nikki. To clarify that you have the right understanding. It is correct that the only time you need to provide a new designation letter is when there is a change in organization at the state level, including governor. So if the governor has changed, if the person identified in the designation letter by the governor or subsequent designees have changed, there is no need for a new designation letter if personnel at OCS changes.
Thank you, Nikki. We also had a question about goals. The question that asked, would communication be appropriate? Would communication be an appropriate goal for a state if communication with eligible entities is a requirement of CSBG? So a valid goal. What we'll say regarding the goals section is that in reviewing and in developing a state's goal, there's much information that we now have collected through our CSBG performance management system. We have the American Customer Satisfaction Index scores. We have the organizational standards, snapshots, and we're able to see our agencies have trouble or doing very well in some areas of the organizational standards. So it would be appropriate for a state to look at areas such as training and technical assistance, perhaps looking at where their agencies fared well or not fared well in the org standards. Perhaps looking at your communication. So yes, that would be an area where state might look at setting a goal. Also, you can think of areas such as partnerships and linkages. Perhaps you found, based on your needs assessment, that there are gaps in services. And so perhaps the state has a goal to build partnerships within your state offices or to help build linkages within your state offices to help fill those service gaps at the local level. So those would all be some examples of appropriate goals or areas in where the state may make goals. The key here is that goals in this section are built around the efficiency of fulfilling the requirements of CSBG and not the requirements of CSBG themselves. It's also an area where states should be looking at how they can improve their performance at the state level as it relates to their requirements and their responsibilities to CSBG and the eligible entities. Another question as it relates to the public hearing. The question is an annual public hearing required for states to have a two-year plan? And I think we may have caused some confusion on the slide where we said that the public hearing would be required on an annual basis. So that's a great question, and we thank you for that question. So no, if you have a two-year plan, you're not required to submit additional public hearing documents in that second year of your two-year plan. Now, the caveat there is if you are making major revisions to your plan, and I'll speak to that in just a moment, we may, OCS may consult with you to require a public hearing. So for instance, if you in your second year of your state plan are wanting to change your training and technical assistance plan, perhaps you've looked at where your agencies had trouble meeting organizational standards, and you've decided that your state strategy will be more focused in certain areas, certain topical areas. And so you feel that's significant enough to make a revision to your state plan. Well, we would not indeed then in that case require you to have a public hearing. However, there are major revisions to the plan that would require a public hearing, such as if the state was looking at the funding allocations to eligible entities, and they were making adjustments to the allocations in which eligible entities would be receiving. This would be an area where that would require a public hearing. So if you are one of those two-year states in the second year of your plan, you're planning on making revisions to your plan, and you're not sure is this a significant revision or not, please feel free to reach out to your program specialist. In most cases, there are many areas of the plan that are related to performance that would not require another public hearing, but for instance, the one example that I provided might be an area that if a state is considering major changes in funding or other major program designs of CSBG within the state, that you would need to do so. So feel free to reach out and clarify with your program specialist. So the question here about organizational standards. Question is it acceptable for entities to create their own plans subject to approval by the state for meeting organizational standards? Technical assistance isn't necessary. The entity just needs some time to come into compliance.
So the question, so I would emphasize the general idea that a state should be offering, if an entity is unable to meet organizational standards, just thought if the entity is able to come up with a plan and does not require technical assistance, then I think it's just a question of what a timely plan of action on the state's behalf, on the entity's behalf. However, the general idea is that entity does not meet work standards. The first effort is to provide them an opportunity for a technical assistance plan or incorporate that. And often they may, if they have multiple standards that they don't meet, and so is that the state report on whether a technical assistance, assess whether technical assistance is needed and include a technical assistance plan as appropriate. So I think the general thought there is if an entity is able to meet the standards without technical assistance, we're not requiring that technical assistance be provided, but there should be some action with regard to that, and I think we've been tracking that as a technical assistance plan, and that's why we're asking that to report on that. So,
thank you, Seth. So we do have several other questions that are related to the designation letter, and so those questions vary. Many people are asking about whether a specific person is named, if a position is named on the designation letter, and I think that there's a question about clarification about when a designation letter needs to be updated. So I'll ask Nikki to give us further clarification on that.
Okay. So the reason why we suggest that you identify persons authorized to certify the plan, the title level is to avoid having to change the designation letter often. So if the person, I'll just give an example, is if the Director of Social Services is identified on the title level and you get a new Director of Social Services, you will not need to update the designation letter. However, in Section 1, when you name that person, it should be clear that they have the same title. So the person, if the designation identifies a title, the person that has that title will identify as the person that's authorized to certify the state plan. So, upload the most recent designation letter to plan. Although a new designation letter isn't needed, if there are no changes, you should include the most recent designation letter whenever you submit a new state plan.
So then please go ahead and enter those into the chat field. We are going to be leaving the webinar chat field open for a few more minutes, even after we close out the webinar, because we know that there may be some additional questions that we may not be able to get to today, but we will work with our partners at NASCAS or work with you directly to get you any responses to those questions. Again, we want you to keep in mind that if you have any programmatic questions as it relates to the development of the plan, what is OCS looking for? What should be included in this field? Then we ask you to submit post this webinar to your program specialist, and we'll be happy to answer those questions. And as we get closer, and even now, if you have any technical related questions as it relates to OLDC, again, Nikki Frazier and Monique Alcantara will be available by email or by phone to answer any of those questions. So So those are all of the questions that we have filtered through in the chat field. I don't think that anyone on this webinar or that's here in the office with us would be an objection to ending early. But again, we thank you for joining us this afternoon to discuss the plan and get prepared for the FY19 submission. I hope that this has been valuable to you, just to sort of refresh us all, and for those of us who are new in the network, to get associated with the state plan, and to remind you of those here at OCS and NASCAS that are available to answer any questions and concerns that you have about the plan. And we'll be leaving the chat feature open for about the next 10 minutes or so. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to put those in the chat field, and we'll find a way to get a response back to you. If there are any questions that we weren't able to answer this afternoon, again, we'll address those questions either with you directly or a larger group at a later time. So thank you all for participating, and we look forward to joining you on our next webinar training.